Welcome to the Indigo Podcast, an exploration of human flourishing at work and beyond. I'm Ben Barron of Indigo Anchor and Cleveland State University.
And I'm Chris Everett of Indigo Anchor. For more information, please visit us at www.indigopodcast.com. All right, so today we're going to talk about networking. Love it or leave it.
Right. So we're going to talk about what networking is. We're going to talk about some forms that it takes. We're going to talk about some of the research on networking because like many other topics in organizations and in life, there's actual social science around these types of topics and some of the outcomes of networking. And then we're going to talk about some practical steps for enhancing your career, your current job. And, we're also going to throw in there just a final note about networking during COVID. And, I think this topic in general is an important one and an interesting one as people think about their careers and their lives and who they know, those types of topics. But it's also probably increasingly important right now and difficult to navigate for people who are thinking about their careers and their jobs when that's a difficult situation for so many people.
Yeah, so some of the data shows that just the word networking leaves people feeling dirty. And there's this idea of some people are super, pro advance their career. They have no problem hey man, help me out. I'm trying to get to X place. And then other people just they can't handle it. And I think that's just because of maybe some conceptions around, networking.
Right. So, if we start talking a little bit about what networking is and some forms that it takes, what are some of your experiences with networking? Are you in the camp of people who throw up a little bit in your mouth when you hear the word?
I hate that phrase. Gross. Well, let's see.
Let's
people
unpack that a little.
People would say, "Okay, I'm going to network," and I always, probably a first definition was, this is where I try to convince people I barely know to do something for me. Hey, I know we just met at this, happy hour mixer, but could you get me a job that pays me 20 grand more?
or some, smaller variation thereof, right? And or just trying to meet as many people as you can and hand them your business card. I was at a professional conference once and a bunch of us got into an elevator and we were going up a few floors. And, after a floor or two, the elevator stopped and the doors opened and no one got off the elevator, but one young person got on the elevator. And we're all part of the conference. Like everyone can tell that because we're all wearing the name badges, right? Hanging around our necks.
You're looking like conference weenies.
Yeah, we're looking like conference weenies. And, but this young man who came onto the elevator, so the doors close and then we go up another floor or two and they open again and he is about to get off, but before he gets off he turns suddenly to everyone else in the elevator and just kind of hands us all his business card and then runs away. I was like so then the doors close and the rest of us just kind of look at each other and we're like, well, I guess that's one way to do it. I don't know. But it kind of speaks to this idea of, is networking just kind of getting people to know you? Is it just handing everybody your business card? And I empathize for that person who doesn't really know how to do this, who feels awkward and is like, well, I guess, I need to meet people and, my career needs to go somewhere different. And I'm told that networking is important and that it's not what you know, it's who you know, and those types of things.
Yeah, I went to this event called Networking After Work, and I've seen this business model.
Yeah, they're pretty common.
And okay, so I'm like, cool, other professionals, this could be neat, and some craft cocktails also good. So you go down, and I guess you pay your $5 or whatever to get in, and that's just a giant, cesspool of people, which was kind of cool. Actually, I think it was more cool if you're single to go. It's like you come here for networking, find a spouse or something. But really, it was just, it's a way for somebody to make some money. Oh, we're by hosting these events, but there's
Mm.
not actually a targeted something, and that could be okay. Especially if you're a young professional meeting other professionals in other industries, it can be, when you're in the sludge trudge of it, it can be hard to make those cross-functional, cross-industry connections as you start to build your portfolio. So you could do some of that, but a lot of that's kind of for suckers.
Yeah, and I think it kind of speaks to the conception that networking is a short-term thing, right? That you can, go meet some people and then stuff's going to happen and it's all going to kind of happen rapidly. And maybe that happens sometimes. And there's probably some examples of it happening that way, but my experience, and I think some of the research would suggest that it's much more of a long term thing, and um, I've found that informal networking through professional organizations can be really great, and it's much more natural, it's less forced, and it actually can lead to some good outcomes. So, going back to my own experiences, when I think about, for example, professional organizations that I'm a part of. One of them, the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, which is actually the conference where that that guy came into the elevator and handed everybody his business card and ran away. Same conference. That's a conference I've been going to, with a couple exceptions. I've gone every year since 2008, and that conference is one in which it's oftentimes a time for you to reconnect with old colleagues, not just old in age, but former colleagues, people who you maybe went to graduate school with, or were your professors in graduate school. Maybe you worked with them in a previous organization, and you're just kind of walking around. It's like, hey, great to see you, and you see those people. And but then
Didn't you, when you were still in grad school, wouldn't you guys like slum 20 to a hotel room or something?
I don't think we did 20, but we did have, I think, 6 or more once in a hotel room, and a bunch of dudes in this hotel room, and I mean there were some snorers there. Fortunately,
Classic grad school
I know,
moves.
I know.
Yes.
I had the presence of mind, I think, to bring some earplugs with me, and that was helpful. But yes, we did because we were all broke. But what's been really cool is that as the years have gone on, not only do you reconnect with some of your former colleagues and so forth, and friends and so forth, but you also kind of start to broaden your network because you meet their new friends, and it's like, oh, hey, this is so and so who I work with, and then your circle starts to widen. And this is not kind of the quick way to do this, in terms of getting broadening your network, but over time it starts to amass, right? And then after the conference, maybe you connect with that person on LinkedIn. Maybe you work on a project with them or something. Like these things kind of happen over time, and that's been a really wonderful thing to see. And we'll talk more about kind of some practical tips here later, but that's been my experience. I am naturally somewhat introverted. Most people don't really realize that about me, especially my students, because I tend to be a little bit theatrical in class. But after class, I like to go and be by myself for a while and be with my own thoughts so that I can reconnect with reality.
De-ick after
That's
being forced socialization.
right, exactly. I mean, even during these conferences, sometimes it's like, oh, I need to go back to my room and just kind of be alone or whatever for a while. So,
And
you
I'm
know,
the complete opposite of that. I
yeah.
go from one group of people to another. People bring me alive. I love that. One thing that I think one group of people that does this really well is
Mm,
the tech community. They have user groups and a different, stuff around, if you're a Java developer, they'll have the Java developers user group. Normally it's a recruiting agency that'll host, give them some space because they kind of want they want to network with the talent that develops. So if you're a software developer or coder, something like that, they have these groups that'll meet once a month, once a week, whatever. And you go, and more senior developers will like present on a topic or show
Mm-mm.
somebody some code. If
That's
you're
cool.
new, you can learn something. And this is what's great about this kind of format. It's not about, oh, hey, man, do you got to know any jobs? It's none of that. It's like, hey, let's learn this cool skill together and
Mm.
find out how we are as people. And that just a natural outcropping of meaningful relationships over shared tasks, right?
Right, right. That's great. So before we go any further in this episode, I think we should probably more formally define networking. We've talked kind of about our own experiences, and I'm sure everyone has their own knee-jerk reaction to
Right.
the word. Some people may be like, networking is awesome. Other people may be more along the lines of, throwing up in their mouth a little bit when they hear it. But
Stop
regardless.
saying that phrase. Gross.
Well, you're the one who says that that's what I'm just trying to be accurate here.
All
So,
right.
let's look at the literature a little bit, and
God.
and this is something that won't make you vomit, I don't think.
No more vomit. I give up. I give up. Take my wallet and my keys.
So this is a study that came out in 2009, which that was 11 years ago as of this recording, but that's still good stuff. And this was in the Journal of Applied Psychology, and this is an article authored by two researchers out of Germany, Hans-Georg Wolf and Klaus Mosher. And it's called the Effects of Networking on Career Success, a longitudinal study. And so, for our listeners who are perhaps not as familiar with this type of research, longitudinal means it's studied over time, which is important because when you're looking at something like career success and networking, it's hard if you're not studying it over time to have a sense of what direction the causality goes, right? Because if you just did a survey and said, "How much do you network?" How good's your career,
I
right?
don't know what counts as networking.
Well, no,
All
I
that
mean,
kind.
even if it's well defined, right? And what the problem is, it could be like, let's say you find a positive relationship between, if you're just looking at one point in time, you find a positive relationship between someone's networking frequency and their career success. It could just be that more successful people in their career do have bigger networks, right? So it's hard to disentangle the connections and the direction of causality here. But when you do it over time, there are ways to do this a little bit better. And so this was a study that was done over 3 years. And before we talk a little bit about some of what they found, which we'll get to in a bit, they have a good definition of networking.
Yeah,
And
this is a good
yeah,
definition.
so and I think it kind of encompasses the broad spectrum here. So, and this is how we're going to think about it throughout the episode here today. They say in the current research, networking is defined as behaviors that are aimed at building, maintaining, and using informal relationships that possess the potential benefit of facilitating work-related activities of individuals by voluntarily granting access to resources and maximizing common advantages. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things there. I think there's this idea of these different purposes. So, building, maintaining, and using informal relationships. Also, this idea of it being voluntary. It's not something that's, mandated by a work relationship or some sort of hierarchical structure.
Right.
And then it's also about maximizing common advantages. The good networking relationships are ones in which there is mutual benefit for the parties involved.
Right. So many relationships have some kind of exchange in them. We'd love for them all to just be existentially magic. I float into the business environment. Ta-da! Here I am. Check out my awesome tutu. And now now we just magically love each other and help each other and sing kumbaya. And it's just not that way. You're busy, you're going, somebody knocks on your door. Hey, you got a minute? You're like, no, I don't have a minute. There's got to be some kind of exchange. And this is very different than, say, social capital or a position within a structural hierarchy. If you're the boss, you're kind of a node. And we talk about networking as a behavior you do as a mode, building, maintaining, and using informal relationship. But then we also have this thing that because everybody's in social media now, we know what network effects are. And if you're like a sync key piece of node, people in hierarchical positions within organizations, like bosses, will tend to know more information than the line level employee, right?
Hmm.
So we're not really talking about that. And then we've got these exchanges that are either high depth or low depth. And one of the things, so if you have 1 million Twitter followers, well, maybe you could reach out to them for some help. Out of 1 million, you might find one or two that could throw you a bone. But
Right.
but they're not very deep relationships
Hmm.
versus the kind of people you've been seeing at PSYOP for the last whatever 15, 20 years or
Yeah.
whatever. You've had time to nurture those kinds of connections.
Right. And, this is very similar to the idea from sociology of strong versus weak ties. And, a strong tie would be, and this is just an interesting concept too, because it's somewhat counterintuitive, but strong ties are, it could be your family members, it could be people you've known for your entire life. And then weak ties are those ones that are people who you know somewhat professionally, who maybe you have some commonality with and have a working relationship, but they're not people you've known forever. And what's interesting is that those weak ties are actually pretty darn important too, right? So it might not be, the million Twitter followers that are going to help you. That might be too weak. That might be too shallow of a relationship. But these weak ties are important and they do matter. And they oftentimes can be a way for you to broaden your horizons and potentially gain some information or access to resources that's helpful for you, provided that you also remember that this is a social exchange. It's not just about you getting stuff out of people for nothing. That's an important
Right.
concept here. So I think
Or the
those.
cynic in me always says the weak ties are important. They know you enough to want to help you, but not enough to know how screwed up you are and the risk in that help.
Right, right. I found this in my career though at the various points, especially before I went into academia. In looking for jobs and trying to navigate all of that. Sometimes it was the people who you just knew a little bit, who were willing to, who maybe had some access to other resources that you didn't. One kind of structural reason why weak ties can be helpful versus those strong ties is that the weak ties actually connect you to other networks. So the
Right.
strong ties are you all know the same people. You think about your family members, it's like, well, we all kind of know the same people. Maybe your uncle or your, cousin twice removed, whatever, might know somebody who you don't, and that's probably true, but getting access to those new networks can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, so when I started off, I was a church music minister, right? And I had a network within that music community of sacred music. Then I went to Nashville, right, and started building a professional music network. And then it's like, okay, time to put aside my wicked musical ways and do something else. Well, what network did I have?
Mm.
It's like, well, what do I put on my resume? Well, I know this guy, he's a pretty good bassist. and, and so one of the things that was really helpful was I joined the National Guard.
Mm.
And I was immediately able to tap into a network of other military members and
Right.
get, a 10% discount at Home Depot. And
But that was a different network than you would have had if it was just in the music community.
totally different network.
Yep,
And I went and got my master's in accounting.
that helps.
That was a
New
totally
network.
different network. And I plugged into, I was working in doing some commercial real estate. I tapped into the certified commercial investment members network. And so,
Right.
like, immediately, because I realized I just had to put some distance if I didn't want to do music anymore.
Right.
And it's hard in Nashville. It's hard to get a job after you've been a musician because they're like, well, I know this is a basic entry level position, but you're just going to give up in the fall and go back out touring or something, right? which was true. To be fair to them, that was a common thread. Oh yeah, I really want to launch my career as a, you know, phone by phone call center computer salesperson. And no, you didn't. You just needed some. You needed to pay rent for 2 months before you went back out on the road.
Right.
So, but tapping into those networks, and they can be geographic, industry. That's important.
Right, right. And what's interesting too is that there's this idea of internal versus external networking. And when we say internal and external, we're talking about within an organization or within typically within your organization or externally, outside of your organization. And especially in, I would say, even smaller organizations. Like once you get to about 100 people, you still got to make some effort to get to know the other people in the organization. But especially when you start, thinking about much larger organizations. Um,
Oh
it,
yes, the organizations that are, transnational super
mhm.
Death
You're
Star battleship megas, like
you're
you're like,
never going to know everybody,
wait a
right?
minute, you work in Department 74692? Wow.
Right, right. But I even think about like my experiences in the Navy.
Hmm.
Knowing different people in different areas. I actually got a text the other day from some people. It's a little group text, and it was some Navy people saying, "Hey, does anybody know somebody in this part of the Navy?" Right. Unfortunately, none of us even knew what the acronym stood for, but no
It's
help
so
there.
it's so big. There's there's unknown alphabet soup.
That's right. But sometimes those types of things do work. And but in terms of internal networking, there's some other benefits. One benefit is just, hey, like you have a problem or you need some sort of fresh perspective or something, oh, do you know anybody over in this part of the organization? Great. If you call them, maybe they'll pick up the phone or they'll answer that email versus if they don't know you at all. That can be very, very helpful. Always be, I think this is where your internal and your external reputation matters. If you're just kind of seen as someone who, bothers people and is kind of a taker, that's not really a good reputation to have. But it also can help in terms of helping with product development, with innovation. And that's where, we came across an interesting study in Administrative Science Quarterly by Andrew Hargadon and Bob Sutton um, that looks at this.
Yeah, yeah. So these guys were looking at organizations like one of them is IDEO,
Hmm.
which does a lot of the design thinking stuff. And because they do design thinking in a variety of industries, people love that because they can bring innovation because they're like, they do this in the wine industry. We could use this in the wheat industry or
Mm,
something. Novel new ideas that span disciplines and functions because they have that kind of cross functionality. And that's a lot of reason why some of these big companies get a McKinsey in there. Do they want to pay the McKinsey price? No. But,
ain't nobody
well,
want to pay the McKinsey price.
I know. I'd love to build the McKinsey rate and but the thing is McKinsey's under the hood of so many well, first of all, their main competitors. And there's some of this kinds of stuff where you have these networking is more than just, hey, help me in my individual career.
Hmm.
Networking is also access to novel ideas that exist outside your scope, information, that kind of stuff. One of the things that's interesting in the Wolf and Mosher that they talk about that like some of these networking ideas can be culturally constrained.
Hmm.
So if you live in a society where everybody's close to guaranteed a job, well, you might be more focused on internal networking with where you're going to make your stuff. But if you're in a right to work state and the US, well, your network has to be cast a little bit wider just because of the environmental factors that'll make up what kind of decisions are wise for you.
That's right. So we talked already a little bit about some of these benefits of networking from an internal development of relationships and knowledge sharing within an organization. But let's move on now and talk a little bit more specifically about some of the outcomes of networking in terms of individual benefits. And one of them, going back to that study that we talked about in the beginning in the Journal of Applied Psychology, it tends to suggest that networking is a predictor of career success, at least as you define career success, maybe by your salary and other types of characteristics like that.
Right. So
I
that's
mean,
pretty good. When you do better at your career, you tend to make a little bit of money,
mm-hmm,
maybe a little more money. Now that'll be industry constrained,
sure.
like I guess, Sumerian pottery experts only make so much money. Um,
One of these days, you've brought up Sumerian pottery a number of times in this podcast, and one of these days we're going to have a Sumerian potterer, on here, our potter to help
yeah, we'll let
understand
him
that.
make the business case. Why should somebody study Sumerian pottery?
I mean, I don't know much about it, but cool. So,
They should because it counts
that's right.
anyway.
Yeah. So networking does tend to help with some of these career related outcomes. It also can be a really good resource for learning. In terms of your own development, your understanding of your industry, understanding perhaps of your job function, and that can help you have some better ideas. It also can help you put together some teams to get stuff done if you know people. That can be a really powerful way for networking to have a good effect.
Yeah. So, and this is all career satisfaction. So when you're young and you're just like, gosh, get me in a company so I can just get out of my parents' basement. Great.
That's
I
good
mean,
motivation, by the way.
you have
Yeah.
a low bar for career satisfaction somewhat at that point in your life. You're just getting in the game. But as you look, just think about how your career is going to span, you know, all these years. Eventually, you will retire and you'll be sitting on your porch and just wondering about the times you had during this life.
Hmm.
Well, a lot of that is, well, you made a little bit of money. Networking, having networks helps you make some money, right? Learning. When we look at what people need to be challenged a little bit, some people love a big challenge, but nobody wants just the same dry stuff every day, all day with nothing changing. So, one of the things is you may do the same role, but you learn and you become more of an artisan in that role. So, learning sources of information, you're getting new data about your industry or what it is you like to do. Maybe invent something new. You know, you were talking about generating better ideas, or if you're facing something novel, like you're working at a think tank out of Boston and you need to discover how to preserve democracy in some country in the middle of nowhere. Well, you probably don't have the skill set to just do that on your own. You're just like, well, we should get a Navy guy. Well, what about this guy worked at a nonprofit? And this guy tells me I need to be more culturally sensitive. That's a country. It's not in the middle of nowhere. Like
Hmm.
you had all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, and you have these new ideas and you get challenged by these new ideas. That's really, really important.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the more real and maybe more meaningful benefits that can come from networking. It's not just kind of this icky thing about handing people business cards. But going back perhaps to the party, the mixer, the event where you're maybe kind of expected to go talk to people and get to know people, and I don't know, maybe find someone new and hand them your business card. There's some interesting research on this as well, and we found a cool study. This is another one in the journal Administrative Science Quarterly, and this one was written by two researchers from Columbia, Paul Ingram and Michael Morris, and it's called "Do People Mix at Mixers? Structure, Homophily, and the Life of the Party." So what was this one about? This was cool.
Yeah, so this one was interesting, and I'll just read a little bit from the abstract. So or summarize a little bit from the abstract. So they used electronic name tags
Hmm, hmm.
for 100 business people at a mixer, and they wanted to see if individuals, and the idea is a minimally structured. All right, there's a bar at the end of the room. Do the networking thing, people. That kind of thing. And so they didn't think, even though this was a business mixer with a bunch of MBA students, if I remember correctly, that
Mhm.
they have real goals of like, I'm trying to get launched in a job, I'm trying to meet people, I'm trying to build a network. They didn't mix as much as everybody thought that they would as far as making new contacts. So
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It says that, they were much more likely to encounter their pre-mixer friends, So, and this is natural. You think about these types of things. You oftentimes will gravitate if you don't know anybody else and you see a friendly face whom you do know, it's like, okay, well, I'll go talk to that person a little bit. This is why oftentimes at these types of events or maybe other types of more formal events that I've gone to in the military or other types of events, it's kind of nice to have that plus one with you. Although, that usually means that I'll just kind of like talk to my wife the entire time. It's hard, right? Especially if you're a little bit introverted. But what they found is that these people would, basically associate with their pre-mixer friends, and I quote from the abstract, even though they overwhelmingly stated before the event that their goal was to meet new people. So they had this goal, I want to go meet new people. They show up and they basically meet up with everybody who they already knew. But they did mix somewhat in terms of encountering some people who are different in terms of some demographics, in terms of sex, race, education, and different types of jobs. They didn't necessarily just go to those people who are similar to them, which is a sociological phenomenon we call homophily, where we tend to be attracted to or like to associate with people who are like us in certain ways. But they did like to be around little groups of people that maybe had at least one person who was similar to them in that way. And so, it's very interesting to think about these dynamics in these types of mixers. So, uh, it even though you may be going into there with the goal of meeting new people, it's not necessarily going to happen. I think you'd have to be probably pretty deliberate about it to actually maybe broaden your network a little bit more.
yeah, so it you could use this stat as a two-edged sword. One, if you're an individual, just be aware of your kind of bias and leanings and start doing it. You know, deliberately breaking those and going for, you know what? If I know somebody here, I'm not going to talk, right?
Hmm.
That kind of thing. More towards that side of the spectrum. But the same thing if and I guess we should just move into some practical steps
Mm-hmm.
at this point for if you want to use this information to enhance your career, your current job, or if you're an organization, what can you do? So, first of all, if you're an organization, you get so much benefit if the people inside your org mix and help develop people. Uh, all right, you already don't want to spend the budget on learning and development. You can at least encourage the people that know to help bring along the people that know less,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Now, there's this interesting case study that I'm reminded of from. There's a book on organizational change, and I can't remember exactly which one it was from, but um, this idea was that there was an organization that was trying to go through some changes, and they were trying to kind of change some aspects of their culture and get one group to talk to each other a little bit more. And coincidentally, they redesigned their physical building, and it became this. Basically, there was a co-located hallway that had some of the snack machines and the restrooms and other types of things that were common for people to use. And what they found is that people from all different parts of the organization would oftentimes encounter each other on what they started calling the street. And that became a way for people to actually start to meet new people, to see
Hmm.
people from other departments. And I can empathize with this actually, from a physical distance type of perspective as well. From some of my experiences when I was on active duty in the Navy, when you're on a ship, it can be very easy to, kind of be in your little area and not necessarily see people from other parts of the ship, like because there are compartments and there are passageways, and so the physical setup of your office could matter for some of these ways in which people move and so forth. Now, of course, things are a little bit different right now, perhaps with us wanting everyone to be separate, but that's something to take into account. Going back to that study that we're talking about with the mixers and people oftentimes sticking around or at least liking to be near their pre-mixer friends during the mixer. One thing I think you can do, this is just going to the practical implications, is let's say you already have a pretty good network. You just want to go to the mixer to get a couple drinks and have a good time. You don't really care about broadening your network at this point. Maybe you're a little bit more senior. Maybe, things are good for you, whatever. This is an opportunity perhaps for you to be helpful to someone else. Maybe there are someone whom you do know who does want to broaden his or her network. And because of, our tendency to want to associate with someone, at least we know one person in the group, that person walks in, go over and say, "Hey, good to see you. Hey, come meet my friend over here. I don't think you know this person. These are some cool people I know in this part of the organization or someone from this company," and help them that way. I think that can be a really great thing that you can do. And I think there's, a little bit of an obligation that I feel as I become more senior in certain parts of my career, to do that for other people because others have done it for me. And I always found it, I always was grateful for it when people did that because, I'm just, maybe it's going back to my personality, but I'm not of the type that, I don't relish the idea. I'll do it, but I don't relish the idea of just walking up to strangers and sticking my hand out, or I guess we don't shake hands anymore. But whatever we do to say hello to people.
Right. Right. So, and this is the idea where you can have some quality in the networking over just quantity.
Yeah.
You're not going for Twitter followers here. You're trying to meet, well, one thing I look for, I'm trying to meet people of character
Mm.
because there's a lot of slime bags out there that don't have the same kind of values I do. So I'm looking for people of the right kind of character, cool people that I enjoy that would that I don't want just to have some kind of surface exchange, although that can be okay. I really want to meet cool people to go down the road of life with. But when we looked at that data from the mixer, well, the unstructured events is not the best way forward if you really want to get people networking and that kind of stuff in
Hmm.
meetings. So this is where you can have a structured event versus unstructured. So startups like a lot of municipalities or regions will have accelerator programs for new businesses where they can introduce venture capital to people that need funding. Lots of those events have a host, so,
Yeah.
and that host kind of knows, oh, you know what? This person likes early round tech type things.
Mm.
These guys are early round tech. Or, oh, hi. Oh, you're a healthcare person. Yeah, don't talk to early round tech guy. He's not a healthcare startup type person. You want to talk to Fred. He likes health. That kind of curation is really cool. Speed dating type things can be another thing. And,
Hmm.
Ben, you brought up, oh, being more senior, structural power, that kind of authority. Well, we've got some data that shows that junior people oftentimes don't feel like they have a whole lot to offer.
Yeah.
And I want to say, well, yeah, if you're a mindless numbskull or you're not being deliberate, you might not have something to say, right? But, we have these kinds of things where we were pairing executives up with junior people. Like back when the internet came out, it was like, and now, elder executive, meet your computer millennial or whatever they were, derogatory term for whippersnapper they were using at the time. And it's like, he's going to show you how to check your email. and, but you could have something. So, maybe some of the more senior people don't know how junior people are perceiving the industry or opportunities in the industry. You've got a unique perspective that you can bring to somebody senior. So if you're sitting around and you're like the most junior guy and there's a pause in the conversation, hey, did you check out that we're having a hard time recruiting based on this? Some of the conversations I'm having with my peers say that it's not what the articles are saying. It's that we don't have learning and development opportunities or whatever that is. You got some good stuff, and people say, this person's junior. doesn't know a lot about this industry and their field yet, but they're awake and they're
Right.
paying attention, you know?
Right. Right. What I found in my own career, to be a very useful way um, to network is through professional organizations. So I already mentioned one earlier, but there are many other types of professional organizations that anyone, if you're in some sort of business function, you can join.
SHRM,
Yeah,
NAMA, the Society of CPAs, the PMI, Project Management Institute, or
that's
for
right.
project managers. There's
And
tons of these.
And I think one of the best ways within those organizations to network is not through just going around and trying to meet different people, although that's fine. I think another way is through volunteering within that organization. So, this is an opportunity, and they're always looking for volunteers,
Right.
different committees. These are oftentimes nonprofits, or they are just some sort of, association of people trying to do something cool together. And so they're looking for volunteer horsepower. And if you can work with some people on a committee, or raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'll take that task. I'll help out here or there." That is an opportunity because you're going to need to probably interact with other people as you do that little role, that little job. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but that's going to give you exposure to new people, and they're going to start to see whether or not you're a competent person. Does this person respond to emails and phone calls? Do they do decent work? Are they useful? Do they learn things? Are they a good communicator? All of those types of aspects of kind of who you are can start to become more of a known quantity. And you can start to build a positive reputation for yourself through those actual experiences of helping an organization do something. So I think that could be a really great way to network. And this is kind of playing the long game. This is saying, look, I'm not just trying to make a bunch of superficial connections. I want to build a reputation that I can be proud of, and I want to do good work. If you always are doing good work, it's not the case that people are always going to notice. There are going to be lots of times that you're doing great work. This is stuff I tell to early career people who are just like, I want to get promoted. I'm like, no matter what, keep doing your best work.
What else do you have, you
Yeah.
numbskull? It's like I want my career. This is the equivalent of I want my career to go viral.
Mm,
I want to have a hit video that takes me to the top, no work required. And
right.
that's baloney, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the best phrases that I like, and there's different variations of it, is something like, after 10 years, I was an overnight success.
Yeah,
You
they'll
know?
talk about the gazelle companies. It's like, oh man, this company just added cash after cash year over. And it took them like 10, 20 years to get to that
Right.
place where they're ready to grow at that speed.
Most people don't realize that. The average age of a successful entrepreneur is 45.
Yeah.
It's not someone who's, just in their mom's
And
garage.
senior people see through this. So,
Mhm.
youngsters, if you're out there listening, right?
Ah, yeah, youngsters.
You may want this. Heck, take a few swings at going viral, whatever
Yeah.
that means. But you better have that long-term chug-a-lug approach to getting your career where you
Yeah.
want to go. It's about building broad relationships. All that these relationships are awesome because when
Right.
you get older, you'll remember, hey man, remember when we were 20 just starting as accountants?
Mhm.
God, those hours. Oh, and now we're in our 30s. Oh, we've got some kids now, maybe. Or, a cool dogs, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, and you never know who may actually be watching, may eventually notice your hard work and your abilities and so forth. And your reputation does follow you. One thing I often tell my students who are getting their MBAs is I say, look, this networking thing. Well, I got kind of talk about some of the stuff we've already talked about here in the episode, but then I say, look, look to your right and your left, look around you. This is part of your network, and the people you talk with and the people you meet as you go through this educational experience is very important. And so if you're, I don't want to, imagine you're 10 years out from your MBA and somebody contacts you and says, "Hey, can you help me with this or whatever?" And you're like, "Yeah, I was on a group project with that jackwagon. No
Yeah,
way."
you know who doesn't do the work. Same thing in the Army. I remember working with that guy. That guy was lazy as crap. when I got out of grad school, so you get a master's in accounting. When I went into my master's, if you had a magazine on accounting in your car, you could get a job in accounting, right? I mean, it was just like full employment. Sarbanes-Oxley compliance was going full throttle. They just could not get enough people. I come out, SOX compliance is rolled off, and there is like no jobs, none.
Wah, wah.
And we're all just basically sitting around over like Jim Beam and a campfire in my backyard, just crying. All of us like, what are we gonna do? I remember looking at my wife, and this was a low point, Ben. This was one of the lowest points of my life, which thank goodness, I haven't had much lower than this, right? But I just look, I may have wasted, $50,000-$60,000, and we don't have a BMW in the freaking driveway.
Yeah. Well, you
I-
didn't even have a BMW. You didn't have a job.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like I
Right.
spent all this money for nothing. But
Yep.
that coming together and staying connected during that hard time. One of my buddies, Chris, started a company, and it's continuing to grow and do well. My friend N, she is doing really cool like IT auditing. She did not necessarily think she would go into auditing banks for their security measures and stuff. And she's brilliant. And I've done a deal. So one of our clients, she's helped out get his IT security squared away. And like I'm already doing deals with people that I just knew had high character and quality in
Mhm.
grad school, and we pulled together through this. But I remember some of those projects. Like I would not pick up the phone for some of those people that ghosted and, hey, you get a group grade,
Yeah.
and I
Right.
did all the work. And it's like,
That's right.
no way, right?
Yeah. Well, so what you're speaking to is that your reputation does follow you, and it's funny you said that you wouldn't pick up the phone for some of those people. I actually got contacted the other day by somebody who I worked with. She actually worked for me in my military role a number of years ago, and I mean she's phenomenal. So do I respond if she reached out and said, "Hey, could you be great to chat about stuff?" Yeah, I responded it very quickly. Of course, I'd be happy to, right? Because it gives me personal joy and satisfaction to see this person thrive, right? So, and I know that it's not going to be time that's wasted. This is a person who has a lot to offer the world. So, be that person, develop that reputation, play the long game here.
Yeah. And don't think of it as a game. Think of it as being
That's great. Yeah.
a real live, breathing, with a heart human being here. This
Mhm.
is about being a quality human. Um, Stop the transactional thinking, and that it's about transaction, it's about connection, it's about people, good people helping good people. And don't do this crap on LinkedIn. I saw. I mean,
Oh, I
yeah,
see it frequently. Like I'll get a connection request from someone, and I can just tell, like by something about maybe their industry, maybe their something they have in the kind of their headline or whatever. I'm just like, if I accept this connection, first of all, people have different kind of rules of thumb around. I don't accept connections from people I don't actually know, or maybe it's people I need to know a little bit, whatever. But let's say it's someone they reach out to you, they try to connect. I just know a lot of times that if I connect with that person, they're going to be of the type that probably the next day they're going to send me a direct message trying to sell me something, or hey, I'd like to have a conversation about your needs in this area for whatever. And I'm like, no. So don't be that person. If it's okay to use LinkedIn, even try to reach out to people who may be a connection of a connection, those types of tactics. That's fine. But make sure that you're building that relationship and and at least have been a connection for a while before you start to sell people things.
yeah. I'll
It's
get.
just gross. No
Hey,
one likes it.
I saw XYZ in your profile, and I thought we should connect.
Yeah.
And I'll even message it back. Sounds good. Why should we connect? And then nothing. They're done. It's just like, whatever. You just wanted to be able to troll my contacts, and then that's lame. So one of the things that if you can't find a job, or if you're trying to expand your network, if you're trying to grow, nonprofits can help. So people
Yes.
that sit, and we've helped lots of nonprofits. It's a great time. It's fulfilling work. So which is great. But the people that sit on the boards of directors of these nonprofits are generally senior, well-connected people within the community.
Yeah.
So if you get in and volunteer and kill it on a project, good communication, good presentation, good data, they're like, oh my God, somebody get this person in someplace that's good.
Yeah.
So it's like the nonprofits, not only do they need your help, but they can help you. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, and yeah, I think that's very well said. And I've been on the board of a nonprofit now for a while, and it's been fantastic. Just personally getting to know some amazing people, and I think from the volunteer perspective, let's say you have an amazing volunteer who does great work with your organization for a while. Depending on who the person is and their interest and their skills, you may, as a board, actually consider that person as a board member. And that's kind of another way to demonstrate your competence and so forth. And if it's a mission that you care about, uh, then that's even better, right? Because then you're doing
Right.
good work for the world. So nonprofits need your help. You can go out there and really get to know some good people. And if it's a nonprofit nonprofits by law in the United States have to be aligned with some sort of mission, right? And um, they, if you identify with that mission, if it's something you care about, guess what? The other volunteers, the other people involved with that organization, chances are they care about that thing too. So you're already having this one thing in common that could be a very deep and meaningful thing for you, perhaps speaking to those bigger issues of values and character. So I think that's a fantastic suggestion. Nonprofits are fantastic ways to get to know people and to do good in the world.
Awesome. So, play the long game, be a real human being, not some kind of soul sucking numbskull, Like, I mean, these should be obvious, but they're not because, and we've got to talk about it because it's
Right.
just not there. What are the practical steps? So now let's talk about COVID for a little minute,
Mm.
right? Ha- I'm at home behind a screen. How do I meet and network with people?
Yeah, so that is a bit challenging, but I think because we have good social networking types of technologies like LinkedIn, and we have the ability to meet people via video conferencing and so forth, it still can happen, and it just might take a little bit more ingenuity on your part, maybe take a little bit more. Um, Proactive reaching out, but it definitely can happen. In fact, I had conversations with two different people last week, just because one of them, someone had recommended to me, said, "Hey, this would be a great person to know based upon your shared experiences here and there. You guys could talk." We did. It was fantastic. Another one actually reached out to me via LinkedIn, said, "Hey, this person. We have this in common. I have this. I'm really curious to know a little bit more about how you ended up in your career." And so it wasn't one of these kind of like asking things. It was a really wonderful conversation and a good way to connect. So it definitely can happen. Technology can help. Obviously, if you're meeting people in person, don't go out there and shake their hand. Maybe shaking hands will kind of permanently go away. I don't know. We'll see, right?
I call it the COVID chicken wing. You do the little elbow
Elbow
bump.
bump. Yeah, I suppose that's one way. I think you probably still have to be within 6 feet of people unless you
No,
have
no,
two.
no. It's a 6 foot
Oh, you
away. I
do it
guess
from
it's
a
not a
distance.
bump. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it's just kind of you act like you're bumping, but you're actually there's distance between your elbows. Yeah, so that could work. I mean, you could do a bow, whatever you do. I mean, there's some great things we could probably use from some other cultures here.
Namaste or whatever
Yeah,
those yoga.
right. Yeah, so that's great. Um, so those are some things that you want to think about during COVID. I think the other principles that we've talked about here still apply in terms of being genuine, trying to add value, doing good work, being meaningful in those relationships that you're trying to build.
Yeah, and you got to be pragmatic, right? So if you're in the bicycle industry, well, you might be able to move up right now. There's such a
Yeah,
demand for
you
bicycles,
go
right?
try to find a bicycle right now. Yeah.
And yeah, so those sectors, Amazon execs might be able to claw a promotion or two out of this.
Hmm.
Um, but if you're in the food industry, and the restaurants are closed or down capacity where you're at, well, then you got to be a little bit more pragmatic. But that might be where you can start networking with the people who've also been maybe laid off. Hey, what are you hearing out there?
Mm-hmm.
This is a great time to build, because one of the things is everybody talks about, I know who my real friends are during adversity.
Mm.
And during this time of adversity, this is a time to find out who the people of character are in your life and deepen your relationship through shared travail here, right?
Right.
And that's something. And if you're somebody that has maybe a stable job, this is a time, and it can be exhausting, but totally worth it to reach out and help be the strength the person to your left and right needs during this challenging time.
That's right. So today in the episode, we talked about this whole idea of networking, loving it or leaving it. And I think there's a lot to be loved there. But you got to do it carefully. And we talked about what networking actually is, some forms it can take, and some of the research around networking. It certainly seems to suggest that it's helpful when it's done in a genuine and meaningful way. And we talked about some practical steps for enhancing your career and using networking as a way to broaden your network, or to broaden your connections, and to broaden your skills. And then we talked a little bit about trying to do this during COVID. I think the similar principles apply. You just might need to have a little bit more intentionality and care as you're going through it. Thanks for listening to the Indigo Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider helping us by rating us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, telling your friends about us, having us on your podcast, or mentioning us on social media. Our website is www.indigopodcast.com, where you can access more information about us and this episode. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.